Reports of anti-Semitism on university and college campuses are not new, but that they seem to be on the rise as they are in the wider population, well, that's cause for concern. How does it affect students and campus life? To help us understand this better, we're joined by two Stand With Us Canada Emerson Fellows. In Montreal, Quebec, Mitchell Horwood, a student at McGill University who is also a senior fellow with CJPAC, the Canadian Jewish Political Affairs Committee. And here in our studio, Yishai Dishi, a student at Toronto Metropolitan University and president of the Jewish fraternity AE Pi at TMU. He's also a VP of Israel for Hillel TMU. Also with us, Malka Daniels, a student at Toronto Metropolitan University who is president of Hillel TMU. And it's great to have you two here in our studio. And Mitchell, nice to have you on the line from Montreal, Quebec. I want to start, where are we going to start? Yishai, I want to start with you. Sure. Unless you are Orthodox Jewish and you dress in a particular way, Jews are not necessarily very recognizable when they're wandering around campus. You, however, are wearing a kippah. You're wearing a head covering. So you are identifiable as Jewish, and therefore I wanted to start by asking, is that ever an issue for you?
It has been in the past. Absolutely, if someone does have anti-Semitic tendencies or beliefs, then I stand out, clearly. I have experienced in the past where I was at a cafe once with my sister getting a drink, and as someone walked by, he just shouted out, F you, effing Zionist. That was a bit unique because he doesn't call me, F the Jew anymore. It changes to the Zionist. And now, he's clearly aligning my Judaism and my belief system with a political organization. And then, just he doesn't differentiate the two.
Is that unusual for that to have happened?
I would say, yeah, it is unusual. It's not common for people to just yell at you things.
How did you react?
He was walking away, and my sister just looked at me. She said, "What the heck?" And we kind of shrugged it off and saying, it's the world we live in.
Malka, I notice you are wearing something around your neck with Hebrew lettering.
Yes.
I think that's your name, isn't it?
It is my name.
It is your name. Okay. Has that posed an issue for you in your daily life on campus?
So I'm very fortunate to have never come across a direct anti-Semitic act, specifically on campus grounds. And I find that wearing my Hebrew name on jewelry sort of prompts a conversation for other minority students on campus, because what's ingrained in our generation is diversity, inclusion, understanding, and I find that it starts conversations and it allows students to find the similarities in your differences.
And you haven't had any adverse or negative reaction to it?
Thankfully, I've only have gotten compliments. I'm pretty sure most people do recognize that it's Hebrew, and considering my name is a notoriously very Hebrew name, it's a bit difficult to shy away from my affiliation with my religion. So thankfully, I've only have received positive outcomes.
Okay. Mitchell, let's go to you in Montreal. Tell us, how do students that you interact with, Jewish students at McGill, how do they feel about showing their Jewish identity?
Well, I think it's a really good question, because I think a lot of people have differing perspectives these days when it comes to showing their Jewish identity. I think it's honestly a risk for a lot of people, including myself sometimes, to even have like a Star of David, or let's say wearing a kippah around, or yarmulke around campus. And I think it definitely does point you out as somebody that is a part of a Jew, and that's something that's a risk. But I do find that on most days, today I'm wearing a nice big sweater, so it's hard to see. I do have a Magen David necklace that I occasionally wear, and it's sometimes I wear it for a sense of pride, because I know that, similar to what Malka already brought up, is that a lot of people are open to having conversations about Judaism. And I think that the story that Yishai said, while an awful story, is an exception. I think a lot of people, especially on my campus, are people that are very welcoming, and people that are not too into the major hate right in front of you. Maybe it's a microaggression, maybe it's something else, but I find that wearing my necklace is a sense of pride, and it gives me a sense of pushing my religion forward, and I'm proud to be a Jew, and I think other people should be proud as well if they're comfortable to show it.
All right, so you wear that Star of David. Have you ever had any incidents or seen any incidents on campus that would be of concern?
Honestly, the thing that I've really seen these days is more online hate, online things on social media, whether it be through platforms like Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok. Those places I feel are easier for people to kind of make those microaggressions, make those little stereotypes that we all hate to hear. And I find on campus it's a little bit harder because people are trying to show a different type of face, if that makes sense. So me personally, I haven't, but I'm sure other people have on McGill campus. I'm sorry for those people, and I'm sure that there are more people that have similar stories to all three of us on campus life that are part of our society today.
Yushai, I gather there was an incident at TMU with an economics professor. Do you know the story I'm talking about?
Yes.
What happened?
A close professor of mine, he was telling me that every year, he's very public, he's a Jewish professor, doesn't shy away from it. And start of the semester, second class, the student comes to him and says, I'm sorry, professor, but my parents told me that they don't want me learning economics from a Jew, and I have to drop your course.
And she did.
And she did.
You talked to him about this?
Yeah, to him, he felt it was sad. He's an amazing professor. I think he's one of the best in the school. He's so knowledgeable.
Do you want to name him? You don't have to.
No, he preferred not to
Okay.
be named. But he also said he wasn't surprised because he's experienced other tropes and other forms of anti-Semitism by other students. And to him, it's starting to become the norm.
There is a view, Malka, I think it's fair to say, that for whatever reason right now in the world, and we can get into this, racism or anti-Semitism against Jews is still somewhat acceptable in a way that it isn't against other minority groups. And I guess I'm wondering why you think that is.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for the question. And I think that's the age-old question because anti-Semitism is centuries years old. You can date people hating Jews just based on their religions for thousands and thousands of years. And unfortunately, that has not changed in the bigotry of society. Why I think that is, I'm not too sure. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the times if people were to voice against anti-Semitism, they'll go hoarse, Acts against anti-Semitism occurs so frequently, probably the highest rate of hate in Canada is against the Jewish minority. And, eventually people may not find it too rewarding to speak out against it and have inevitably become complicit in that.
Let me get Mitchell's take on that. Mitchell, this is a prevailing theory, which is that it's sort of okay to say bad things about Jews or to hate Jews because it's a thing that's been around for a long time. You wouldn't say bad things about, people understand. You can't say bad things about black people, about Asian people, about indigenous people, but somehow it's still okay against Jews. That's the conventional wisdom. What do you think's behind that?
I think a big part of it is that people assume that people that are Jewish, because they're not a visible minority as an Asian person or an African American, they just assume that we have a different type, like a different status on the pole of discrimination, just because we can kind of blind out in a way and just pretend to not be a Jew. But that's not true, because a lot of people, even if you aren't visibly showing a yarmulke or visibly showing a Star of David, can practice Judaism in different ways. And I really think that attitude is completely unacceptable. We are all people that deserve to be treated equally. There should be no room for any type of discrimination. Just because we're not visible minorities does not mean that should change. And that should be the standard for everybody. And I think if more people held that standard up, there'd be far more less anti-Semitism, not only on college campuses, but also in general society.
Yishai, you got a theory on this?
Yeah. I think throughout history, there's really been three main types of anti-Semitism: political, religious, and conspiratorial. We've seen forms of religious anti-Semitism over the years in forms of, mass exiles, either by England or Spain or Portugal, and that's for your religious beliefs. We're making it a Catholic-only country. All the Jews have to leave or convert. We've seen conspiratorial anti-Semitism over the centuries, whether that be you think the Jews run the media, or they run the monetary system, or blood libels back in the medieval century. Now we have a new form, which is political, where because Jews have their tie to Israel, you can somehow justify this anti-Semitism due to the Israeli situation and your beliefs about it. And you believe that, perhaps one group, the Palestinians, are under a greater oppression than others. So you can't support Palestinian freedom while at the same time standing up against anti-Semitism. That's that belief, which is not true, because they're not together. They're separate issues.
Well, let me put that to Mitchell. Mitchell, can you tell the difference between somebody who gives you a hard time because they're critical of Israeli political policy against the Palestinians, for example, versus someone who uses that conflict to express their dislike of Jews? Can you tell the difference?
Well, a lot of times on McGill campus, for example, McGill, in my opinion, I find it to be very antagonistic. It's a campus that's very loud with a lot of groups that support BDS, boycott, divest sanctions. And there's a lot of groups on our campus that are very loud in terms of their dissatisfaction with what's happening in the Middle East in terms of Israel and Palestine. And I think a lot of that time, me personally, just speaking for myself and my friends that I've kind of come in contact with, whether it be through Chabad at McGill events or Hillel events at McGill, a lot of things that I would kind of say is that people assume that just because that the issue is completely intertwined and everything's the one and the same. And for a lot of Jews, that's not the case. I think if you go up to any different type of Jew, for better or for worse, they have a different opinion on this issue because it's an opinion that's been part of a discussion going on for centuries and centuries. I find that a lot of people will come up to me and kind of ask me my opinion on Israel. They'll see I have a Star of David on. They know I'm Jewish. They see events on Chabad events, and they'll really ask me about these perspectives. And I think the real key to learning about this, no matter if the issue is one way or the other way, you can have both ways, all that stuff, is about education. Because I think that everybody can learn a little bit more about figuring out ways that Israel can stand on its own and ways that Jews are people that are sometimes separate from that issue. Jews are people that should not be discriminated against, just like how people in Israel are people that should not be discriminated against. There's a conflict going on. It's so much more complicated than having a yelling match on a street. And I think if we can get that culture throughout our campuses, that's the first step to actually educating people. And it's by getting steps to have actual conversations that move progress and make people feel safe on campus.
Malka, Mitchell just mentioned education. I wonder how much education about Jewish history or about the Holocaust do you think Jewish students in particular and the student body in general know?
Jewish students in particular, I think, are very ingrained in Jewish history, and because everyone has, unfortunately, familial experiences with instances such as the Holocaust, they are quite educated in the instances leading up to the Holocaust and what portrayed afterwards, not so much perhaps. Outside of the Jewish sphere, I know the province of Ontario is definitely pushing for more Holocaust education, which
they just announced that a few weeks ago.
They did. So I've definitely noticed a larger interest in being able to sort of understand Jewish trauma in that sense. But, it's up to the individual, and sometimes people just don't want to educate themselves. There's a lot of problems going on in the world, and unfortunately, Jewish trauma is not one that is, taking the pedestal.
And let me go to the other side of the coin with you, Yishai, which is to say, how much discomfort do you sense among your fellow Jewish students that relates to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, this political situation in the Middle East?
I would say the majority of my friends are supportive of Israel, if not all of my friends are supportive of Israel. When events, such as wars occur and things are more heated, such as they were back in May 2021, when there was that small war with Gaza, I would say they're more hesitant to be vocal about it, especially on campus, because they know it's a heated topic. People get very riled up. People take it very seriously, I would say, more than they take other issues that have nothing to do with them so seriously.
Do they feel uncomfortable, though? Do they feel uncomfortable about? I mean, Israel is no longer the charming underdog in the Middle East as it was after the 1967 war. They're now seen as an oppressive power by many people who think they are oppressing the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
Is that an uncomfortable position to be in if you're on campus?
They're put more on the defense side. Now they're defending Israel a bit. Depending on what can happen, they can feel a bit embarrassed over what's going on there, and they feel this need to defend their country, and that is uncomfortable.
Okay. Let me read something here. This is Michael Levitt had this the other day in the Toronto Star. Michael Levitt is with the Wiesenthal Foundation now. He used to be a member of Parliament in Toronto. He wrote, "Our community is actively engaged in building allyship with Canadians of all backgrounds who share our commitment to building an open, inclusive society. How much comfort should Canadian Jews take in the solidarity of their co-citizens? How much can they count on non-Jews to help ward off the type of disaster that figures so prominently in Jewish history?" Okay, Mitchell, some good questions there. How do you answer them?
Yeah, it's actually a thing that I was gonna kind of bring up after what Ishai was saying, because I think it's really true, is that no matter how much work I think we as Jews do to educate people and to teach people and to forgive their misconceptions and to try to reach across the aisle and give our opinion, the support from non-Jews is it's even more essential to me. For example, I live with two non-Jewish roommates here at McGill University, and with my work with Stand With Us as an Emerson Fellow, I've been putting on events where I table across McGill University. I'll have a table out and I'll be talking about Israel. I'll be educating some people by giving them pamphlets and things like that. And a lot of times I ask my roommates, "Can you sit in for me for like a minute? I have a class to go to. I can't do it the entire day." And they're like, "Of course." And by having non-Jews interact with people about issues that are like Israel, which are so key for Jews, but also key for non-Jews, just because it's going on in the world, those little moments like that make me so proud, because it shows that you don't have to be a group to support a certain group, no matter what the issue is. Just because I'm not African American doesn't mean I don't want to support African American rights, and it goes the same for every issue. And I think having issues like Israel and Judaism and anti-Semitism, getting that support from non-Jewish people is even better, and it makes me so happy, because it just shows that with education and with lots of cooperation, we can actually make a real difference by reaching across the aisle and teaching our friends that may not be Jewish about issues related to anti-Semitism.
Malka, how much allyship do you see on TMU campus?
TMU has definitely ingrained deeply in their culture allyship, inclusivity, diversity, and even within the sphere of Hillel TMU, the Jewish students at TMU, we work hard to not only represent ourselves, but the intersectionality of ourselves. So just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you can't identify as a person of color, as well as part of the LGBTQ+ community. And the solidarity between those different communities is also within our own community. So we definitely are pushing for rights of inclusiveness, and you see that on an administrative level as well as a student level. But inclusivity is, I would say, the deep pillar on the TMU campus.
Let me ask Ishai about that. Do you have a sense that the administration, that the faculty at TMU is onto this issue and wants to be helpful in resolving it?
I haven't really seen that so much. I remember in the past 2 years when a lot of bigotry was coming up against stopping Asian hate and Black Lives Matter, the school was very prompt in putting out messages of support, of solidarity with all of those students on campus. I even remember seeing a message from the student body about those students celebrating Ramadan and wishing them happy holidays. I never really saw that for anti-Semitism or any warm wishes for Jewish holidays.
Would you like to?
When anti-Semitism is on the rise, as it was, a year ago, and it still is, yeah, I think it's words of comfort of knowing that we stand by you. You shouldn't be afraid. You should be proud. And that obviously any form of anti-Semitism is unacceptable on campus.
Do you find it odd in 2023 that you as a Jew occasionally feel uncomfortable on the campus of a major university in downtown Toronto?
I should find it odd, but I've also kind of become used to it, and it's not so surprising to me. And I understand my place in the world, and I understand, Israel's place in the world, and I understand how people view it and how they view me because of it. So I may not like it, but I've definitely become used to it.
That's probably not a good thing.
Probably not, no.
I want to thank the three of you for coming on to TVO tonight and sharing your views about this, rather tricky subject. Mitchell Horwood, McGill University in Montreal, Malka Daniels and Ishai Dishi at TMU here in the capital city of the province. Thanks so much, you three.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.